My name is Samantha Miller, 33 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina. My mother, Elaine Miller, passed away 2 years ago, leaving me the comfort of knowing she had carefully prepared for her daughter's future. She once whispered to me on her deathbed, "This fortune will be your shield. Don't worry, Samantha, you will never be left alone." I clung to that promise like a lifeline after her funeral. Yet one sweltering July afternoon, as I sat in my mother's old office, the scent of oak wood and salty ocean air drifting through the cracked window, my chest tightened. In front of me was a thick stack of files taken from the safe. At first, I only intended to find a few legal documents. But as I opened folder after folder, my eyes fell on numbers that made my pulse race. A bank statement clearly showing $1,250,000 transferred to someone named Veronica Hale. I had never heard that name in my life. My fingers trembled as I turned more pages. This time, it was an invoice for a luxury apartment in New York, costing more than $80,000 a month, under Veronica's name. I swallowed hard, sweat running down my back. It didn't stop there. Other files revealed purchases of jewelry from Tiffany Company, Swiss watches, yacht rentals in Miami, and extravagant trips across Europe. The totals weren't just in the millions, they added up to an enormous fortune. $42 million gone in just 2 years. I sank into my mother's old leather chair, feeling the room shrink around me. The image of her holding my hand, whispering, "This money is yours for your future," burned in my mind. But now it was nothing more than ashes on black and white paper. A whistling sound came from the hallway, casual, carefree. The door swung open. My stepfather, Richard Hale, 56 years old, walked in. He always carried himself as if the world revolved around him. Keys jingled in his hand, a half-smile fixed on his lips. "Sweetheart, digging through your mother's papers again?" His tone was soft, almost sweet. But tonight those words cut like a blade. I lifted my head, forcing myself to stay calm. I spread the statements and contracts across the desk, then asked directly, "Richard, who is Veronica Hale?" He froze, the smile fading. A second of silence passed before he forced out a laugh. "Just a business contact. You wouldn't understand complicated dealings." I slid one document toward him. "Complicated to the tune of $1,250,000? And what about the apartment, the yacht, the jewelry? All from my mother's inheritance. Explain this." His hands hovered over the paper, then pulled back, unwilling to touch it. For the first time, I saw a gray shadow spread across his face, the cold mask replacing his usual confidence. "You don't know what you're talking about," Richard muttered, voice rough. I locked eyes with him, unblinking. "On the contrary, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Nearly $42 million have vanished. And every record leads to you and Veronica." The room fell silent, only the distant crash of waves outside filling the air. My heart pounded, yet my voice was strangely steady. Richard stepped closer, his gaze darkening, desperate to regain control. "Your mother trusted me. She knew I deserved to manage this estate. Stop stirring trouble. You can't handle this." I shot to my feet, breath sharp, but kept my chin high. "You betrayed her trust. And if you think I'll stay silent, you're wrong." For the briefest moment, I saw his lip twitch, his eyes flash with both rage and panic. The mask of the devoted husband cracked, revealing a darkness I had never dared imagine. Clutching the files tightly, I left the room. Outside, the sunset stretched long shadows across the ocean, but inside me, a new fire had ignited. I remember clearly the next morning. The Charleston sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow across the dining table. I sat there holding a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The familiar sound of an engine rumbled in the driveway, then the front door swung open. My stepfather, Richard, walked in, looking polished as if he had never known a sleepless night. "Sweetheart, up so early?" he asked lightly, his calm tone enough to make me sick. "What's with that long face?" I set the cup down, forcing my voice to stay even. "Richard, I've seen enough papers. The invoices, the contracts, the accounts. You can't deny it." He pulled the morning paper off the shelf, leisurely opening it as though I had just mentioned the weather. "You've been watching too many movies. Those numbers are complicated, you wouldn't understand. Stop blowing things out of proportion." I pressed my lips together. $42 million gone is what you call complicated? Do you think I'm stupid? His eyes flashed cold, but the smile stayed fixed on his lips. No, Samantha. But you don't have the capacity to handle this. Your mother left behind a burden and I've taken care of it for her. You should be grateful. I heard the contempt dripping from every word. He no longer sounded sweet. He spoke like a dictator handing out favors. My fingers dug into the chair to hold back my anger. What you call taking care of, I shot back, never looking away, is funneling my mother's money to another woman. And you think I'll stay silent? Richard snapped the paper closed and slammed it on the table. The sound echoed through the still kitchen. He leaned toward me, voice dropping low. You're delusional. You don't have any legal proof. And even if you did, who would believe you? I'm the one who provided for this family. They'll say you're just a bitter daughter angry over your mother's death. My heart pounded, but I didn't let the fear show. You underestimate me. I will uncover the truth. He sneered, straightening up and circling the table like a wolf stalking its prey. I've given you everything you need. A home, reputation, stability. What you should do is stay quiet. Because if you go against me, he paused, leaning close to my ear, you'll lose more than you realize. The threat didn't need details. I knew exactly what he meant. Absolute submission. For a moment, I remembered my mother's weary eyes in her final years, how she dodged my questions about finances, always saying vaguely, "Don't worry, Richard takes care of everything." Now I understood she had been worn down by his pressure long before. I pushed my chair back and stood. If you think I'll bow down, you're wrong. I am not my mother. His eyes narrowed, dark with menace. Do you really want to make yourself my enemy? You don't understand what I'm capable of. Then try me. My reply was short, steady. For a moment we just stared at each other, the air stretched taut between us like a wire ready to snap. Then Richard laughed, the hollow sound echoing through the house. He tucked the paper under his arm and walked casually toward the door as if nothing mattered. You're not ready for this game, Samantha, he called back before slamming the door. But soon you'll learn to keep quiet. I stood in the silent kitchen, listening to the sound of his car fade into the distance. My heart still raced, but this time not from fear. It was from a growing resolve. I knew I couldn't face him head-on yet. He was too cunning, too experienced, his mask too carefully built over the years. But I also knew one thing for certain. That mask had begun to crack. I turned back to the cluttered pile of documents on the table. Among the cold numbers, I realized one truth. If I relied only on emotion, I would lose. I needed undeniable proof, something Richard couldn't twist. I whispered to myself almost like a vow, "You want me silent? Richard, I'll show all of Charleston your true face." My hands clenched, fingernails digging into my skin. In the morning light, I no longer saw myself as weak. I was ready to step into a battle I knew would be brutal, but also the only path to keep my promise to my mother. That night, when the beach house had fallen into silence, I sat alone in my mother's study. Piles of files, invoices, and bank statements were scattered across the old oak desk. Each number, each forged signature cut into me like a blade. I knew if I kept confronting Richard directly, he would twist the truth and paint me as delusional. I needed someone on the outside, someone clear-headed and strong enough to expose everything. After hours of sifting through my mother's old contacts, I found a faded yellow business card. Raymond Morrison, private investigator, Charleston, South Carolina. I vaguely remembered that my mother once hired him during a property dispute with a former partner. My hand shook slightly as I dialed the number, my heartbeat pounding as if the call itself would alter my fate. "Hello." A deep, steady male voice came through the line. I took a breath, speaking slowly. "Mr. Morrison, this is Samantha Miller, Elaine's daughter. I need help." There was a pause so long it nearly stole my breath, then he replied, "I remember her. Meet me tomorrow, Meeting Street Cafe, 7 p.m. The next evening, Charleston glowed under the streetlights, but my heart felt like stone. I stepped into the vintage cafe, golden lamps casting warm light over the dark wooden tables. Morrison was already there, a man in his 50s with graying hair and resolute eyes. He gave me a slight nod as I approached. "I recognized Elaine's voice in you, but now I see it's true," he said, his tone gravelly yet firm. "Tell me, Samantha, what made you call me?" I pushed the file across the table, each page revealing transfers, luxury leases, and jewelry invoices. Morrison didn't rush. He flipped through slowly, sharp eyes missing nothing. Veronica Hale. He repeated the name, thoughtful. Not unfamiliar. I've seen it in another file years ago. But Samantha, these aren't impulsive expenses. This is a deliberate pattern, carefully hidden. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Richard has been doing this for years. Morrison nodded, pulling a small notebook from his pocket, jotting down quickly. I'll check. If this is a repeated behavior, there's much more than what you've found. A week later, we met again at a small diner on King Street. The air smelled of grilled meat, silverware clattered all around, but our table sat in heavy silence. Morrison placed a thick envelope in front of me. Take a deep breath before you open it. My hands trembled as I pulled out a stack of photographs. Richard holding hands with a red-haired woman, smiling on the balcony of a penthouse. The date stamped on the photo froze me. It was 3 years before my mother passed away. I flipped through more. Pictures in Miami, in Chicago, in Paris. The same woman, Veronica, appeared in them all. Then came photos of other women. A brunette, a blonde, even one much younger. Not just one, Morrison said, voice heavy. Richard had at least 5 ongoing affairs over the last 10 years. All financed with your mother's estate. My palms went cold. So, the whole time my mother was alive, he was betraying and deceiving her? Morrison met my eyes, calm but unflinching. Samantha, Richard didn't just spend money. He built an entire web of lies. Every year, millions flowed out, disguised as legitimate investments. The noise of the diner faded, replaced by the thunder of my heartbeat. The memory of my mother's frail smile on her deathbed blurred, replaced by the brutal truth. She had lived and died inside a lie. What do you think I should do? I asked hoarsely. Morrison closed the file, his tone slow but resolute. The first step is yours. Do you want to expose this? Because once you do, there's no turning back. Richard is the kind of man who, when cornered, will fight viciously to keep control. I clutched the photos, chest aching but eyes burning with resolve. I'll see it through. My mother trusted me with this responsibility. I won't let him steal her dignity. Morrison gave a small nod, his lips tightening. Then be ready. I'll dig deeper. But Samantha, remember, the further we go, the greater the danger. I drew a long breath, my hand trembling over the photos as though sealing a vow. Richard thinks I'm weak. He'll soon find out he's wrong. The neon glow of the diner reflected in the window beside me. In my tear-reddened eyes, I no longer saw a deceived daughter. 3 days after my meeting with Morrison, I returned to the beach house, a heavy weight pressing on my chest. The file he had given me was still in my bag, each photograph stabbing into my memories of my mother like a needle. I knew Richard wouldn't stop. A man accustomed to lies would never willingly give up control. That night, under the silver glow of the moon over the ocean, I opened my mother's old desktop computer. I remembered she once set up a private inbox for important documents, though after she passed, Richard had taken over almost everything. I tried a few old passwords she used, and to my shock, the inbox opened. Among hundreds of emails, one subject line froze me: wire transfer request, $2 million. My heart thudded as I clicked it open. It was a bank confirmation, a scheduled transfer for the following week, the recipient, Veronica Hale. I stumbled back, my hands ice cold. $2 million, the last of my mother's fortune, was about to vanish. It was as if Richard wanted to erase every trace she had left me. I bit my lip hard, forcing back tears. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from Morrison: found something else. Richard is rushing to move the last assets into Veronica's account. Deadline: 7 days. Samantha, this is your only chance to stop him. I looked around the oak-paneled room, the walls pressing in with my mother's memory. Her voice echoed in my mind, firm yet warm. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not worthy. That promise pulled me to my feet. The next day I met Morrison at a small diner near the harbor. He entered with a grim face, setting a thick envelope on the table. Here's a copy of the bank confirmation. The transfer order is already in. If we don't act, the full $2 million will end up with Veronica. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The bold figures on the page blurred my vision. Morrison's voice was steady, certain. He knows his time is up. He's draining everything, then he'll vanish with her. Samantha, if you want to save anything of your mother's legacy, we have to block this now. I sat in silence, waves pounding rhythmically beyond the window like a beating heart urging me forward. Finally, I lifted my head. If I agree, how do we do it? Morrison leaned back, eyes narrowing. We need to prove the transfer is fraudulent. I've got connections inside the banking system. But Samantha, you must be prepared. Once I move, Richard will know it was you. Fear rippled through me, but resolve burned stronger. I've lived in fear too long. Now it's his turn. That night when I returned home, the living room lights were still on. Richard sat in the armchair, whiskey glass in hand, his eyes sharp as I walked in. Out all day, Samantha? His tone was casual, but suspicion laced every word. I set my bag on the chair, forcing my voice calm. I had personal business. He scoffed, swirling his glass. Personal business? You think I don't know what you're up to? Don't forget, Samantha, I control all the papers. You have no chance. I held his gaze steady. You're wrong. I know about the 2 million. If you move it, you won't just lose the money, you'll lose everything. The glass halted midair, amber liquid trembling. His face darkened, features twitching for an instant before he chuckled bitterly. You think you can stop me? I've lived my life in power. And you're nothing but a dreamer. I clenched my fists, but my tone stayed calm. Maybe I was before. But not anymore. You'll see. We locked eyes, neither of us blinking. For a split second, I saw the fury beneath his arrogance. And I knew, the battle had just entered its most dangerous stage. That Charleston night was pitch black, the sea wind howling through every crack of the old house, making the walls groan like restless ghosts. I sat in my mother's study, files scattered before me, the laptop glowing with scanned documents Richard had tried to bury. Pressed against my chest was her letter, written in her soft handwriting. Samantha, protect this legacy when I am gone. Every line burned like a lantern in the dark. At exactly midnight, headlights cut across the window. A car screeched to a halt outside, heavy footsteps pounded the hallway, then the door burst open. Richard entered, his face etched with challenge. Behind him glided a woman I had never seen before, blonde hair gleaming, red silk dress glimmering in the dim light. Morrison had once mentioned her. Dahlia Turner, Richard's longtime mistress, 35 years old, the shadow who appeared whenever shady deals took place. Dahlia leaned lazily against the doorframe, lips curled in a mocking smile. So this is Elaine's stubborn daughter? I expected someone fierce. Instead, I see a little girl clinging to dusty papers. Richard slammed a thick folder onto my mother's desk, pages spilling everywhere. He pulled out a chair opposite me, voice low and icy. Samantha, it's time you sign this. Just a few banking formalities. If you care about the family's reputation, you have no choice. I glanced down. Bold letters read, Property Transfer Agreement. A forged contract, declaring I surrendered all rights to what remained of my mother's estate. I drew a deep breath, steadying my voice. You call this a formality? Oh, it's fraud. Dahlia strutted closer, placing a manicured hand on Richard's shoulder before leaning down, her perfume suffocating. Sweetheart, just sign. Think of it as buying peace. Otherwise, she smirked, things could get ugly fast. Richard tapped his fingers against the desk, eyes locked on me. Do you want the world to hear that you betrayed your mother? One word from me and everyone will believe it. Signed, Samantha. Now. I opened a drawer and drew out a white envelope, setting it gently on the desk. Richard frowned. Dahlia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Slowly, I slid out my mother's letter, her slanted handwriting glowing under the lamp. She left this for me, I said, enunciating each word, never breaking eye contact. Her message: never let anyone destroy what belongs to you. You think I'll sign? Never. I will protect this to the end. Richard faltered. For a fleeting second, his arrogant grin cracked. Dahlia stepped back half a pace, her face paling. From my jacket, I placed a small USB beside the letter. Inside are the emails, the statements, the proof of your transfers to Veronica, and to you, Dahlia. All of it is backed up in the cloud, already sent to my lawyer. If I disappear, it goes public. Richard slammed his palm on the desk, his face flushed. How dare you threaten me? I lifted my chin, voice unyielding. Not a threat. The truth. You no longer control me. The room froze. Beyond the walls, waves thundered like war drums. Richard's teeth ground together before he lunged, reaching for my mother's letter. But I was faster, tucking it back into the envelope and sliding it into my prepared bag. Dahlia's eyes flickered with fear. She stepped back, whispering, "Maybe, don't push this too far. If she really has the evidence." "Shut up." Richard snapped, his breath ragged as he glared at me. "You'll regret this, Samantha. You don't know who you're fighting." I clutched the envelope tight, backing toward the door, my fist clenched. "No, Richard. You'll be the one who regrets it." In his eyes, rage clashed with unease. And I knew, this battle had just crossed into its most dangerous stage. The room froze in place. Richard stood blocking the desk, eyes bloodshot, while Dahlia clutched her purse, glancing around as if searching for an escape. I gripped the envelope tight in my hand, breath unsteady but gaze unflinching. The doorbell rang suddenly, its long, insistent chime making Richard hesitate. He shot Dahlia a sharp look. "Who would come at this hour?" he growled. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. Richard strode to the door and yanked it open. Light from the hallway spilled in, revealing Raymond Morrison, dark coat, calm expression, eyes sharp as steel. Beside him stood an older woman with silver hair neatly tied back, her posture dignified. I recognized her instantly. Margaret Collins, my mother's longtime friend, who had been by her side in her final years. "We need to talk," Morrison said, his voice steady and firm. Richard scowled. "At this hour? Who do you think you are, barging into my house?" Morrison cut him off, pulling a small recorder from his coat pocket and pressing play. Richard's voice filled the room, raw and undeniable. "Sign it, Samantha. If you dare oppose me, I'll make sure you lose everything." Dahlia immediately stepped back, her hands trembling. Richard froze, stunned, then snapped, "Cheap tricks. That proves nothing." Margaret moved forward, her tone calm but resolute. "Richard Hale, I've stayed silent long enough. Elaine once confided in me her fear that you would exploit Samantha. Tonight I recorded every word you said. Charleston won't ignore the truth." I widened my eyes at Margaret. For a fleeting moment I saw my mother's strength reflected in hers. Richard gave a dry laugh, trying to mask his unease. "You think a few recordings will bring me down? I have lawyers' connections. Samantha is nothing but a bitter child." Morrison calmly placed another file on the desk. "And what about the bank transfers, the penthouse leases in Veronica Hale and Dahlia Turner's names? How do you explain luxury assets paid for with Elaine's estate?" Dahlia's face drained of color. She turned to Richard, her voice breaking. You said no one would ever find out." "Shut up, Dahlia," Richard hissed through clenched teeth. But Margaret stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "Elaine once feared Samantha wasn't strong enough. Tonight she proved the opposite. And you, Richard, you've revealed nothing but greed and betrayal." I drew a deep breath, regaining my composure, and placed my mother's letter on the desk. "This is the proof she prepared. She entrusted me to protect everything. Richard, you have nothing left to hold on to." In that moment, Richard's arrogant smirk shattered. His eyes darted nervously around the room, fists tightening at his sides. Dahlia, on the other hand, spiraled into panic. She backed toward the door, mumbling, "I don't want any part of this. I knew nothing." Then she fled, her heels striking the wooden floor in frantic rhythm. "You'll pay for this, Samantha," Richard roared. "All of you will regret it." Morrison remained calm. "Regret? You should worry about yourself. Everything's backed up and already sent to Samantha's lawyer. If you so much as touch her, the court will know by morning." Silence fell, broken only by the crash of waves outside. Richard stood rigid, his face pale though he strained to appear composed. I locked eyes with him, my voice steady. "You thought I was just a pawn. From this moment, I'm the one holding the board." Margaret laid a gentle hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Elaine would be proud." For the first time, my hands no longer shook. My heart raced not with fear, but with the certainty that Richard Hale was finally cornered. The grand conference room of Attorney Harrison Blackwell's office glowed under bright lights, the oak-paneled walls radiating solemn authority. I sat on the left side, my chest heavy but my gaze firm. Before me stretched the long green-clothed table where Harrison, a man in his 60s with white hair and calm demeanor, prepared to read my mother's final will. Richard arrived late, draped in a gray suit wearing arrogance like armor. He dropped heavily into the chair across from me, smirking. "Today it all ends, Samantha. You'll be surprised." Beside him, an empty chair made me uneasy. Moments later, Dahlia rushed in, heels striking sharply against the wooden floor. She wore a lavish dress, her painted face failing to mask tension. She leaned close to Richard, whispering until he nodded. Harrison adjusted his glasses, his voice resonant. "We are gathered to announce the lawful will of Mrs. Elaine Miller." Silence swept the room. At first he read small bequests. Keepsakes for longtime staff, money for the gardener, donations to the local church. Richard's impatience showed, his fingers tapping the table, his jaw tight. Finally, Harrison paused, pulling a sealed envelope from his briefcase. He looked around the room before continuing. "For the remainder of the estate, including properties, stocks, bank accounts, and all legal holdings." Richard leaned back, lips curling in triumph. "Mrs. Elaine Miller bequeaths everything to the Elaine Miller Foundation, an organization supporting women betrayed and financially abused." Pen's stilled, breath caught. Richard flushed red, then paled within seconds. "What?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Impossible. I was Elaine's husband. I have rights." Harrison calmly opened another file and laid it out. Under South Carolina law, spousal rights are void when adultery and financial misconduct are proven. And here. He spread photos, wire transfers, emails. "The proof is undeniable. You have no claim." I met Richard's eyes, my voice steady. "You thought you could steal everything. But my mother saw through you long ago." Dahlia turned pale beside him, stammering, "Richard, you told me no one would ever know. You promised." "Shut up," he barked, but the power in his voice had evaporated. Harrison continued, his tone sharp. "Mrs. Elaine also left a letter with her will. It states clearly, 'I trust Samantha to protect women who have been wronged. This estate will serve as their refuge.'" Tears burned in my eyes. For a moment I felt my mother's presence in the room, smiling gently. "No, this can't be," Richard rasped. "I won't accept this. I'll sue every one of you." Harrison snapped his file shut, tapping his pen firmly. "You may try. But no court will side with you against such evidence." The room bristled with tension. Richard searched desperately for support, but met only cold stares. Suddenly, Dahlia shoved her chair back, the scrape loud in the silence. "I want no part of this," she cried, fleeing down the hall, her heels echoing harshly. The door slammed. Richard was left alone, his face twisted, eyes bloodshot. His voice broke into a roar. "All of you betrayed me. Samantha, you'll pay for this. You made me lose everything." I sat still, my hands firmly on the table, my tone low but cutting. "No, Richard. You destroyed yourself. I only did what my mother asked." In that moment, the whole room seemed to tilt toward me. Richard, once the man pulling every string, was reduced to nothing more than an enraged, isolated shadow. 6 months had passed since my mother's will was read, and Charleston seemed to wear a new face in my eyes. Each morning as I walked into the old red brick mansion downtown, now the headquarters of the Elaine Miller Foundation, I felt a rhythm of life I had never known before. Gone was the sense of isolation and suffocation. In its place came freedom and the responsibility my mother had entrusted to me. The building, restored from a historic estate, still bore tall windows, wooden beams, and a stone fireplace. But the walls now displayed portraits of women who had overcome betrayal and rebuilt their lives. I remembered the opening ceremony. Hundreds had gathered, local reporters among them. When I stood at the podium and read my mother's final words, the hall went silent, then erupted in applause. In that moment I knew I had chosen the right path. Running the foundation was not easy. Each day I received letters and phone calls from women deceived financially, abandoned in marriage. They arrived with weary eyes and heavy shoulders. Yet many left in tears, tears of relief because they had found hope. Sometimes I spent hours in the counseling room just listening. And when they gripped my hands whispering, "Thank you. I'm not alone anymore," I felt my own heart quietly heal. Meanwhile, Richard faded from Charleston's social orbit. No more cocktail parties, no weekend golf at the exclusive club. Rumors spread quickly. He had been evicted from the beach mansion and forced into a cramped apartment on the city's edge. The friends who once hovered around him for wealth now turned their backs. Dahlia vanished after the will reading, abandoning Richard with the wreckage. Some said she fled to Atlanta. Others whispered she had left the state altogether. Once by chance I saw Richard again. I was leaving the foundation at sunset, walking through the park. He sat alone on a weathered bench, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled. When he noticed me, his eyes flickered with surprise, then dropped away. He tried to rise but sank back down, his shoulders trembling. I kept walking. My heart tightened, but I did not stop. His loneliness was the end he had written for himself. Life had already delivered justice without my hand. That evening, standing before my mother's portrait in my living room, I whispered, "Mom, I kept my promise. He can never touch your legacy again. I've turned it into a refuge for those you once feared would be left unprotected. You can rest easy now." On quiet nights, I often sat in my office, watching the glow of street lamps through tall windows. My mind drifted back. The trembling as I first held the bank statements, the confrontation with Richard in my mother's study, and now the steadiness as I led a foundation of my own. Fear had given way to conviction. Charleston carried on with its timeless rhythms, ocean waves breaking on the shore, the scent of jasmine weaving through old streets. But for me, everything had changed. I was no longer the silenced daughter deceived into submission. I had become a woman in command of her destiny, upholding my mother's last wish and transforming pain into strength to pass on hope to others. And I knew this journey had only just begun. Samantha's story reflects a reality still present today. Many women are exploited and betrayed, both emotionally and financially, sometimes within their own families. Yet her journey shows that pain can be transformed into strength when we choose to face it and rise. By founding a charity to support women who have endured similar struggles, Samantha proved that justice is not only written in legal documents, but also lived out in the choices we make to defend our worth and give hope to others. What do you think about Samantha's journey and how she kept her promise to her mother? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and meaningful family stories.